My name is Kayla. I am 28 years old, and I spent 31 days in a hospital bed alone, while the three people who share my DNA never once walked through that door. Not my mother, not my father, not my sister. I need you to really absorb that number for a moment. 31 days, more than 400 hours of machines beeping beside me, nurses changing my IV lines at 3 in the morning, me lying there staring at a water-stained ceiling tile, wondering whether this was the day my body would simply give up. And in all that time, every single one of the people biologically obligated to love me could not find even 1 hour to be there. This is the story of how my family revealed exactly what I meant to them, and how I finally gave them an answer they were not expecting. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were my workout days, and I never made it to the gym. I collapsed on my kitchen floor while making coffee, and the next thing I was aware of was fluorescent ceiling lights and a stranger in scrubs asking me to confirm my own name. Serious internal complications, the doctors explained to me afterward. The kind that do not give you time to organize your life first. Emergency surgery within hours, not days. I called my mother from the back of the ambulance with trembling hands, my voice breaking as I told her I was terrified and being rushed into the operating room. Her name is Glenda. She went quiet for a beat, then said, "Oh no, that sounds awful, honey. Keep me posted." And she ended the call. Keep me posted. As though I were giving her a weather update. As though I were not her daughter on a stretcher. I called my father next. Roger answered on the third ring with the television blaring in the background. I told him what was happening. He said, "Geez, all right. Well, let us know how everything turns out." I could hear him ask someone else in the room if they wanted anything from the kitchen before he even properly disconnected the call. I did not bother calling my younger sister. Tansy and I had not spoken in 3 weeks, ever since our last conversation ended with her accusing me of being overly sensitive for gently mentioning that she had borrowed $400 from me without any acknowledgement of paying it back. Instead, I sent her a 3-word text. Going into surgery. She left it unread for 6 hours. The surgery itself is mostly a blur of cold, sterile rooms and masked professionals moving around me. What I remember with absolute clarity is waking up afterward, confused and raw-throated from the breathing tube, turning my eyes toward the doorway, fully expecting to see a familiar face. The chair beside my bed was vacant. It would remain that way for 31 consecutive days. I want to be fair, because fairness is something I hold on to even when others do not offer it in return. My mother did send a few texts here and there. "How are you feeling?" on day 3. "Hope you feel better soon," with a cheerful emoji on day 9, as though I had a mild sinus infection rather than multiple surgeries and a body fighting its own recovery. My father sent exactly 2 messages during my entire stay. His second one asked whether I still had his lawnmower at my place. My sister sent nothing at all until day 19 when she texted to ask if I had seen her missing AirPods case. I lay in that room and watched every other patient around me receive visitors. An older gentleman 2 doors down had his grandchildren bring him hand-drawn pictures every single day until his wall looked like a colorful gallery. The woman across the hallway had a constant stream of friends arriving with homemade soup and magazines, making sure she was never sitting alone. Meanwhile, I had a nurse named Priya who began quietly slipping extra pudding cups onto my tray. Because, as she put it, somebody needed to treat me a little. A nurse. Someone who had known me for 4 days cared more visibly about my survival than the 3 people who had known me my entire life. I wept more in that hospital from the weight of loneliness than I ever did from the physical pain of recovering from surgery. And that particular kind of pain does not simply fade when you heal. It rearranges something deep inside you. It teaches you, slowly and permanently, exactly where you fall on the list of people who matter to those who were supposed to cherish you most. Once that knowledge settles in, you cannot talk yourself out of it. You can only decide what you are going to do with it. I was discharged on a Thursday. Nobody came to take me home. I booked a rideshare with still unsteady hands and returned to an apartment that had gone untouched for over a month. My plants had all died. The mail had accumulated into a towering pile beside the door, a paper monument to just how invisible I'd become to everyone. I sat on my living room floor that first night, because I lacked the physical strength to make it to my bedroom, and I made myself a promise. I promised that I would never again confuse obligation with love. I would never again treat being related to someone as evidence that they cared about me. And I promised that the next time any of them came to me needing something, I would allow myself, for the first time, to say no. I did not have to wait long. Exactly 31 days after I returned home, because I was counting everything by then like a person quietly gathering evidence for a case only she understood was building. My mother sent a text. No inquiry about how my recovery was going. No acknowledgement of the previous month. Just this. Hi, sweetheart. Exciting news. Tansy and Vance are engaged and getting married in October. We found the most stunning dress for her, but it's $12,000 and we're a bit short. Could you help out? Family helps family. I read it 3 separate times. Then I laughed out loud, completely alone in my apartment, the kind of laugh that contains no actual joy, just pure disbelief looking for somewhere to go. $12,000 for a dress. For the sister who had not sent me a single meaningful word while I was fighting to stay alive, but found the energy to text about missing electronics. I want to give you a little background on Tansy because the full picture matters here. She is 2 years younger than me, and for as long as I can remember, the favoritism in our household was never subtle enough to even qualify as hidden. Growing up, she received new seasonal clothing while I wore her hand-me-downs despite us being completely different sizes. When she struggled academically, tutors were hired. When I struggled, I was told to work harder. She received a brand new car at 17. I received a rusted old vehicle at 19 from a family acquaintance, which I repaired myself using money earned at a part-time job. I spent years telling myself I must be misreading things, that surely this version of events could not be accurate about my own family. But 31 days in a hospital with an empty chair beside you has a remarkable way of stripping away every last thread of denial you have been holding on to. My mother's text sat there glowing on my screen, a flawless little artifact of everything broken in my family. They had not reached out to check on my recovery. They had not said a single word of apology for any of those 31 days. They were reaching out because they wanted something, because that was always what I had represented to them. Not a daughter, a resource. I considered ignoring the message entirely. I considered sending back a long, exhaustive response cataloging every single day I had spent alone, every shallow text, every empty silence. I wrote that message 3 different times and deleted it 3 different times. Then I realized something important. They did not deserve my explanation. They did not even deserve the energy it would take to compose my anger into something coherent and readable. They deserved exactly the level of engagement they had extended to me. So I opened my banking application, transferred $1 single to my mother's account, and typed 2 words in the memo field. Good luck. Then I set my phone to silent and slept more peacefully than I had in weeks. What followed the next morning was everything I had quietly imagined while drifting off. My phone was flooded with activity. 11 missed calls from my mother, 6 text messages from my father, a man who had managed only 2 texts across my entire hospitalization, now suddenly capable of composing full paragraphs. And then a message from Tansy herself, the first communication she had sent me in over a month that was not about her belongings. Are you serious right now? $1? Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? Mom showed everyone at brunch, and now Aunt Raina thinks you hate me. This is supposed to be the best time of my life, and you're making it about yourself. Making it about myself. I sat with that phrase for a long time. As if surviving major surgery alone, as if grieving the absence of every person who was meant to love me, as if 31 days of silence in a hospital room were somehow a theatrical performance designed to inconvenience her dress shopping experience. I did not respond to anyone that day. I let the messages stack up the same way my mail had stacked up while I was hospitalized, untouched, and growing. It was my father who eventually called me directly 2 days later rather than texting. Some stubborn, unfinished part of me answered. "Calla," he said in that particular clipped tone he uses when he is irritated, but trying to project reasonableness. "What was that about? Your mother is devastated." "Devastated," I repeated back to him. That is a very specific word to choose. He said she only wanted to help her daughter have a beautiful wedding and asked whether that was really so wrong. And something inside me that had been sealed shut for 31 days of swallowed silence finally opened. I told him I had almost not survived my second procedure. I asked whether he knew that. He admitted he had not realized it was that serious. I told him he did not realize because not one person ever asked. I told him I was alone for every one of those 31 days, watching other patients surrounded by people who loved them, while a nurse brought me pudding because she felt sorry for me. And now, 1 month after I came home to dead plants and a pile of mail and a recovery I navigated entirely by myself, the first contact from my family was a request for $12,000 for a dress. He said it was not fair that they had been busy. Busy, I said, all three of you, for 31 days, simultaneously. He had no answer because there is not one. There is no interpretation of busy that accounts for failing to show up for someone whose life was in danger. Not when that same window included brunches and dress fittings and texts about lawnmowers. I told him the dollar was my answer, a precise reflection of the effort they had shown me. Then I hung up. But the story did not end there. 2 weeks later, I learned something that completely reframed everything I thought I understood about that month. I was at my cousin Della's house, Della being one of the few family members who had actually visited me in the hospital, twice with soup and novels because she remembered what I liked to read. She mentioned almost as an aside that everyone had been so worried about me and she was relieved I was okay. Then she said something that stopped me cold. She told me my mother had informed the entire extended family that I had specifically requested no visitors, that having people around stressed me out during recovery, that I wanted complete privacy. I had said nothing of the sort. Not once. I had told my mother repeatedly in those early days how desperately I wanted someone there with me. My mother had not simply failed to appear. She had actively constructed a story to explain and justify her absence, and in doing so, had made my isolation look like my own preference rather than her abandonment. She had taken my suffering and repackaged it as my personal choice, so that no one in the wider family would ask uncomfortable questions about where she had been. Della showed me the family group chat I had been removed from years before. What I read made everything fall into place. My mother had been sending casual updates throughout my hospitalization, describing me as doing well, resting, wanting space. There was a conversation between her and my aunt about Tansy's wedding planning, dated during my second week in the hospital. The week my fever had frightened even the medical staff, in which my mother mentioned being swamped with wedding preparations. Swamped with wedding preparations. While I was hospitalized with complications that had scared the doctors. There was no mention anywhere of my situation being critical, no expression of alarm or urgency, just a quiet and deliberate erasure carefully arranged so that the wider family would have no reason to feel compelled to show up, and no reason to question why my immediate family had not. I sat in my car outside Della's house for 20 minutes afterwards, simply breathing, restructuring my entire understanding of what that month had actually been. I had assumed my family's absence was the result of ordinary selfishness, everyday failure, the kind of negligence that imperfect people fall into without fully recognizing what they are doing. But this was something else entirely. This was a deliberate construction. A choice that had been dressed up and disguised so that I would absorb the abandonment privately without even the basic dignity of other people understanding what had genuinely happened to me. That was when I decided the dollar, while satisfying, was not sufficient. Not because I wanted to cause damage for its own sake, but because I was no longer willing to be the only person living inside the truth of that story. I asked Della to temporarily add me back into the family group chat. When she did, I posted one thing: a photograph of my hospital discharge paperwork showing the exact dates of my admission and surgeries, followed by a single sentence. For anyone who was told I preferred not to have visitors, that was never true. I asked for support every day I was there. I simply did not receive it. I thought everyone should know that before the wedding celebrations continued. I left the chat immediately afterward because I did not need to witness the reaction. I only needed the truth to exist somewhere beyond the inside of my own mind. The fallout, according to Della, was substantial. Relatives who had quietly accepted my mother's version of events began asking pointed questions. My aunt called my mother directly. The relatives who had been eager to contribute to wedding festivities found themselves considerably less enthusiastic once they understood the full picture of what had occurred during my hospitalization. My mother attempted her predictable response, suggesting I'd been confused by medication and misremembering conversations. But discharge paperwork does not get confused. Official dates do not misremember themselves. The truth had become something with real weight behind it, and it no longer required her approval to be believed. As for the wedding dress, I was told through Della that the budget was ultimately reduced dramatically, the guest list contracted, and several family members who had previously been happy to participate became notably less available once they understood what had actually taken place while I was in that hospital. I did none of that to undermine Tansy's wedding. I want to be completely transparent about that. I did it because I am no longer the kind of person who quietly absorbs deliberate cruelty in order to protect someone else's comfortable fiction. If the truth created consequences for them, those consequences were not of my making. They were simply the natural outcome of a lie finally being exposed to air. Several months have passed now. I have not spoken to my mother, my father, or Tansy since the day I posted that message. There has been no meaningful reconciliation, no genuine apology that makes any of it make sense, just silence. The same silence they offered me across 31 days in a hospital room. The only difference is that this silence is one I selected for myself, and there is an unexpected peace that lives inside a choice like that. What I have instead is Della, who actually shows up. I have someone I began seeing a few months after I came home, a man named Holt, who once drove 40 minutes through heavy rain to bring me soup when I had nothing more serious than a regular cold because he told me that is simply what you do for someone you genuinely care about. I have a small number of people in my life now who understand that showing up is not optional, not transactional, not something reserved for occasions when they need a favor returned. I still think about that empty chair sometimes. 31 days of it sitting beside my bed, still and untouched. A quiet testament to exactly where I ranked. But when I think about it now, the grief is different, smaller. That chair represents the moment I finally, permanently understood the distinction between people who are family by blood and people who are family by choice. So I want to ask you something because I think about it more than I probably should. If the people who are supposed to love you without condition only ever appear when they need something from you, do you think $1 and 2 words was too much? Or was it precisely the response they had earned?